We're now looking at the intervals for the Locrian mode. This is something you probably aren't going to find a lot of resources out there because not many people focus in specifically on the Locrian mode, but it is one of the modes and it's tied to all the other modes. And I think really they're just scared, man. They're scared because Locrian's crazy. It's loco. It's a little loco, and that's okay. We're not scared of it, man. Not here. We're gonna do the process just like any other mode. That's what we're going to be doing on this one. So we'll go into the B Locrian. We're going to be measuring around this point. We're going to have the same shape. Let's think about how the Locrian basically relates to what we've been doing in this process and possibly distinguish why the Locrian is kind of pushed to the side. It's the odd man out. It's the weird one. It's the oddball. So let's go up and remember what we have been doing. If we go up, we've been taking a look at the major scale and the related modes because the major scale, otherwise known as the Ionian mode, is our kind of baseline mode that we measure everything to. However, a lot of people learn on the guitar position number 1, including me, which I call position number 1 from a caged system. You might call it a G-shaped C major chord. So in other words, it looks like this from a pentatonic standpoint. Right, and then if I add the 2 other notes to make it a 7 note from a 5 note to 7, it looks like that. So I'm just playing from A to A in this position, and that would basically mean I'm playing in A minor, but if I focus on any other note within that scale, I would be playing from that position, which would be a different mode, is going to be the general idea. So instead of moving this position around to change different scales, we're just going to put that same scale across the whole fretboard, and that's what we're going to be working with here. Now, obviously, the major is the one that we want to compare everything to because that's what's typically done in Western music. You could use the minor to compare everything to, but when you look at everybody else's resources, then there's always going to be comparing to the major, not to the minor. So so you might as well just accept that that's the way everything is laid out, right? So we're going to say that means that the easiest way to do this is to look at the intervals related to the major and then try to compare them possibly to the other modes. Now note there's 3 ways that we can basically think about our positions on the guitar. One is we can just learn the shapes. I can just learn the colored notes here, and I learn the shapes, and usually we break the fretboard into 5 shapes, although you could do it different ways, have 3 notes per string and 2 notes per string, even if you want to. We've talked about in other courses or sections. But so you could do that, or you can build the shape using the formula, which would be like whole, half, whole, half, and that formula would change based on where you start from. It's all the same formula. It's just going to change based on where you're starting from, and that's going to give you the different modal formulas. Or you can do it by intervals, which is our point of focus now, picking a note within the shape that you're working on and measuring around it. So we'll build the same shape looking at a different focal point. So you start with the major, build the shape around it with measuring to that focal point, then go to the next note, which is the D in this case, which is a Dorian, and which just happens to be a D. Dorian doesn't always be a D Dorian. It could be any note Dorian. But then we have the E, which is going to be the Phrygian, and so on and so forth. And we've done that around, and now we're going to be working on the B, which is the Locrian. Now, we also talked about the idea of when I look at the modes, it's useful for me to think of the modes because that helps me at least to build a major or minor chord from the notes in the scale. And the Locrian is the funny one. So let me just explain that quickly here. So if we go to usually in a major scale, people start to say, look, I know the notes in the major scale. Now I know this shape. I can finger this shape. But what if I want to build chords from this shape? If I want to build chords from the shape, I need to know the intervals so that I can basically build the chord from any note in the shape, basically. That would be one way that you can always build a shape if you knew the interval shapes, which is what we're working on now. But to build a triad chord, you need to know if it's going to be a major third or a minor third. That's going to be the only note that's different in a triad chord for most of the notes in the scale. So remember the default way we can do that is say, well, all of the notes except for the Locrian over here has at least a fifth that I know, right? It's going to be a perfect fifth. So I could go to any of these notes and add the perfect fifth, and I could build at least a power chord, and that's a pretty safe thing to do. But I'd like to be able to build the third. How can I do that? Well, people start to memorize that the 1, 4, 5, like the bluesy progression, is the major, and then the 2, 3, and 6 is minor, and the 7 is the funny Locrian that a lot of people just drop off and don't build a chord on at all, typically, right? Because it's the weird one. So that's going to be the general idea. But when I go to like some other mode, like the Dorian mode or the Phrygian mode, we reshape or we shuffle the same notes in a different order. So therefore, we want to still be able to see in a different mode what would build a major or minor chord. How could we do that? Well, if we name the modes, then at least I number the modes based on the major scale. Then that makes it a little bit easier possibly, because then if I number the modes with an absolute numbering system based on the major scale, I can know the relative positions, which I have memorized, that the 1, 4, 5 are major chord constructions and the 2, 3, and 6 are minor chord constructions. So that's why one thing I would do here is say, okay, I want to memorize not only that the 1, 4, 5 is major, the 2, 3, and 6 is minor, but I want to give a numbering system to the modes, which will allow me then to move to the modes and see the relative positions as they relate to the major scale, and that'll help me to build a major or minor chord no matter what mode we're in. And beyond that, I'd like to not just build a triad chord, but add the 7, 9, 11, and 13, the 9, 11, and 13 being equivalent to the 2, 4, and 6. Those are the ones we skip when we skip every other note. And the only way to really know that, if I can add those and still be in the same key, is to know like the modal constructions. So, and that's why the modal constructions will be useful when we go beyond that. So how can we learn the modal constructions? Well, we can say, we can first learn the major scale normally, and we learn the intervals of the major scale. And then oftentimes we learn what we might think of as the opposite of the major scale, which we're going to call the minor scale, which is just from a modal standpoint, the sixth mode, the Aeolian mode. In this case, the A Aeolian is related mode to the C major. And then oftentimes we can learn the other modes because they can be related to the main major or minor, and the Locrian's the weird one. That's what I'm going to get to. So right, that means that the 2 and the 3 modes, which are Dorian and Phrygian, are minor modes because they have a minor third, and therefore they're only going to have one interval difference from the main minor Aeolian. The 4 and the 5 modes are going to have major modes because they have a major third, and they're only going to have one interval difference from the Ionian. What about the Locrian mode then? That's the odd one out. So how can I compare the Locrian to something? Well, the Locrian, it's basically a minor mode. We can kind of think of it because it has a minor third, but then it has the flat fifth, and that's kind of the thing that makes it crazy. That's what makes it kind of loco. Doesn't quite fit. So we often don't play totally in the Locrian mode, but it's useful to know the chord construction in Locrian mode, because we certainly might build a chord, which we can kind of think of from basically the Locrian from a B. Like if I want to build a chord from B when I'm playing in any of these modes that are in C major or related modes, then I want to know the Locrian. I want to know how to build a chord off of it so it'll fit in the scale. So at the least, I want to know the Locrian for that purpose, right? So you can kind of think of the Locrian. So if I compare the intervals to the major and the minor, it's easier to compare the Locrian to the minor. But let's just think about it here. So the major scale has a 0 note away perfect first, a 2 note away major second, a 4 note away major third, a 5 note away perfect fourth, a 7 note away perfect fifth, a 9 note away major sixth, an 11 note away major 7. Now, when we go to the minor mode, the Aeolian, we expect that to be the main minor, which will have the most difference between the majors, what you would expect. That's not exactly work that way, but that's what you would expect. So what would you expect to happen? I would expect the perfects to remain the same perfect fourth and fifth, and then all of the majors to be flattened to the minor, which is what happens except for the Dorian, which for whatever reason doesn't flatten, and is still a 2-note away major second. So the main minor therefore still has a perfect first, it still has a 2-note away major second, and then it's got a 3-note away minor third. It still has a perfect fourth, a perfect fifth, and then it has an 8-note away minor sixth and a 10-note away minor seven. Okay, so then we can compare the Locrian to that, but notice there's one mode that's more minor than the main minor. And you might think of this is the mode that should have been, you would think, the most opposite to the major mode, and that's the one that does have a flat second. And we call that the Phrygian mode. So the Phrygian mode, like if I was going to make a story to kind of think of this in my mind, like you got the major scale, it's like the major scale's cool, but they're all upbeat and happy and whatnot. And then the minors come in and it's like the main minor's like, I'm the main minor because I'm deep and like sad and heavy, you know? And then like the Dorian is like, yeah, whatever, you think you're minor, I'm more minor than you are because I've got a minor second and you don't. The Phrygian, sorry. The Phrygian is like, hey, I'm more minor than you are, Aeolian, because I have a minor, a 1-note away minor second, and you don't, right? So then it's even more heavy sounding than the main minor, and then the Locrian comes in, is like, dude, I'm like as minor as you are, Phrygian, plus I'm a little crazy. No one wants to mess with Locrian because it's like that crazy dude. It's like, might not be the biggest guy in the bar, but the dude, you're just like, guy's got a screw loose, man. The dude's got a screw loose. Just let him do his thing and don't. and that screw loose is the flat fifth. Now the flat fifth, there is kind of that interval in another one. It's actually, funnily enough, in the Lydian, but it's actually an augmented fourth. So an augmented fourth and a flat fifth are like the same, but the Locrian is the one that I think it comes out to most. That's the thing that makes it crazy. It's got a flat fifth. No one else has a flat fifth, man. No one does a flat fifth. You went totally crazy. You went full retard. No, what did I tell you about it? You never go full retard. That Locrian, I don't know where that went. You can't use that. No, it's okay. Hopefully that wasn't offensive. I don't know. So let's go down to the Locrian. Let's go down to the Locrian. Check it out here. By the way, that was a movie quote from like a Tom Cruise movie where the guy, you know how they play like Forrest Gump, and he's like kind of stupid, but he's not totally stupid, you know? And then the joke was that the guy took a part where he was like a total idiot, you know? It's like, no, that's too far. You've ruined your acting career. Forrest Gump level is not smart. I'm not a smart man. That's okay. But then your acting career went down the toilet because, anyway, it's a good movie though, somewhat. But anyway, okay, back to focus. So we're on the Locrian mode. So if I look at the intervals for the Locrian mode, once again, we've got the 0-note away perfect first. They all are going to have a perfect first because that's obviously the interval we're on. And there we have the 1-note away minor second. That's what you would expect from a minor mode, the one the Phrygian has, but for whatever reason, the main minor Aeolian doesn't. So it's basically it's more minor than the main minor is how I think of it. It's got a 3-note away minor third. That's the defining factor of something being a minor mode versus a major mode. So I would think the Locrian then would be clearly defined as some kind of like minor mode. It's got a 5-note away perfect fourth, so it hasn't gone crazy there. The perfect fourth is usually in all of the modes except for I think the Lydian, where it has an augmented, and that's pretty crazy too. So the Lydian is like the craziest major scale, but it doesn't have the darkness in it, so no one makes fun of it for having that for that same interval because it's the same interval as this one, which is the fifth, which makes the Locrian kind of crazy because that's going to give you that really tensiony sound. of the flat fifth, which sounds kind of cool as a lead-in. It gives you a lot of tension. And I've been looking at this tensiony sound a lot because, again, in Western music, that seems to be like the distinguishing factor. Like we play a lot with like the 7 and have the flat 7 in a blues thing, and then switching between the major third and the minor third and stuff. And that has a lot of tension. And I think historically, this is my theory on this, and this is the reason this is relevant, is this is why I think maybe Locrian kind of got somewhat of a bad rap, and people don't like focus on it like they kind of should, at least from a chord construction standpoint. You would think it would be important, and that flat fifth adds a lot of flavor. That's like the blues note when you look at a minor blues. So I use it like all the time. And I think what happened is, this is my theory, and I've looked it up on ChatGTP, and it seems to agree with me, but you can't really tell with ChatGTP. But they say, I think in Western music, what happened is they started doing opera and stuff, and they can tell a story with the music. They tell a story with the music, and they needed a convention to say when something was bad or evil or wrong, and they always obviously they're going to use that tensiony sound. So they started to assign that tension sound as a thematic thing, assigning it to mean something bad or evil or something. And then in the West, we still had the Western scale over here. So we still had the major scale and whatnot in America, right? In America, we're like, over here in America, we're like, okay, we've got that, but then maybe we weren't as cultured or whatnot, we weren't going to as many operas or something, right? And so we started saying, hey, that minor thing, that tension sound is cool, that's like, so you start messing around with that all the time, and because it's kind of cool sounding, and we weren't constrained by the idea of storytelling using the convention that's the evil sound or something's wrong sound or something, because it sounds kind of groovy. A lot of other places play that too. It's not just us, I don't think. But then I think what happened is then the cultured people, the Europeans came in, the cultured, and with the opera people, and they're like, look at these guys, they're playing evil stuff, with that flat fifth, because that signifies badness in the opera, and that's how rock and roll. They started to saying that rock and roll was evil. I think it kind of got that name maybe because of that interval, right? Because they said that was evil, and they were playing that interval, and so now rock and roll is evil, and then rock and roll, of course, ran with that, or some of them did, and I think, but it's not evil. It's just a tension, and that's just a convention. It's just a convention. So I feel like that needs to be said. Like, it's not, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just the opera used it. That's what I feel like. But I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong on that. Let me know. Any case, it has the flat fifth. That's the thing. And then it's got an 8-note away minor 6, which is the same as a minor mode. And then it's got the 10-note away minor 7, which is the same as a minor mode. So it's a minor mode that's more minor even than the main minor, the minor scale, equivalent to the minorness of the Phrygian. So it's basically like Phrygian, except it has one interval difference from the Phrygian, and it's the crazy interval, making it Locrian, and that's going to be the flat fifth. No one else has a flat fifth, man. No one has a flat fifth. Except the Lydian kind of does, but we call it an augmented fourth because it's a fourth for it, but same interval. But it's a major scale, and so it's major, so it's in the cool club, and no one really makes fun of it for having. No one calls it crazy so much. It's only the Locrian we call crazy with the flat. Anyway.